Chapter 48: Legacies and Expectations. Within the opulent chambers of the Rose Palace, far removed from the smoldering ruins of Fort Blanky, a woman thrashed against unseen bonds, tears and spittle marking her face in anguish. Ed Troyven, the Sky Dragon, stood over her, his expression glacial. He berated the damned woman, striking her hard across the face. She cried out, calling him master as she crumpled. Troyven coldly demanded an explanation for her actions, specifically for stealing his subordinate, likely referring to the lead agent Evelyn had slain. He held up a crumpled parchment bearing an official seal, the order she had apparently given: kill the bastard Ragnar and the White Dragon Squad. He questioned her audacity, asking if she even realized the gravity of the crime she'd committed by giving such an unsanctioned order. The woman, scrambling on the floor, spat defiance, insisting she did it for Troyven, to protect his grand plan, claiming he ruined it. Her voice rose to a hysterical shriek, demanding that Troyven cut off the head of the one who killed her Axion. Was that truly so difficult for him? Her grief morphed into venomous rage, fixated on Theo Ragnar. Everything, she screamed, was connected to that damned one. They had to tear them apart, kill them all. Only then would her heart, would Axion's soul, find even a sliver of satisfaction. The mention of Axion seemed to strike a nerve, though Troyven's expression remained unreadable. He leaned down, grabbing her hair, harshly reminding the foolish woman of her designated role, asking if she'd forgotten it. Fear flashed in her eyes, replacing the rage. Troyven's voice dripped with contempt. They had lost the dragon's sword, Balmung, the centerpiece of the entire plan, and his nephew Axion was dead. Because of her failures, he declared, she would no longer bear the title daughter of Troyven. The woman stared up at him, trembling, the cold fury in his eyes reminding her terribly of her own father. Troyven turned away, dismissing her as useless. He ordered his impassive guards, standing nearby, to put her somewhere out of his sight and ensure any related items or information were thoroughly removed to prevent leaks. The woman pleaded desperately for her master to reconsider, promising she would do anything, if he just let her live. Troyven ignored her cries, walking away as she choked and gasped for salvation amidst the bodies of other attendants littering the staircase, likely victims of her earlier, unsanctioned rage. All his meticulous plans, ruined, Troyven seethed internally, solely because of that one variable, Theo Ragnar. He swore then and there, his eyes burning with cold resolve, that he would kill the boy himself. Man, talk about family issues needing more than just therapy. Meanwhile, back in the relative quiet of his assigned quarters within the white-armored dragon cavalry headquarters, Theo sat examining the rewards displayed on a holographic interface. Materializing from the system was a magnificent greatsword, its surface gleaming under the room's light. The interface provided details: dragon sword, strand of fate. Type: greatsword, divine relic. Usage condition: unknown. Effect: unknown. A note added that it was currently sealed and required the release of the divine seal to use. Theo murmured the weapon's name, dragon sword, reaching out to grasp the hilt. As his fingers closed around it, a pulse of dark, viscous energy erupted, violently repelling his touch and sending the heavy sword clattering to the floor, where it bit into the stone tiles. Theo flexed his stinging hand, acknowledging the raw power contained within. It truly lived up to its name. The energy felt alien, fundamentally different from the innate aura of the Ragnar clan. Its polar opposite, in fact. And, as the system stated, it was useless until he could figure out how to release the divine seal. He recalled that divine relics, artifacts from the mythological age, often appeared deceptively simple, like junk even, and wouldn't easily fall into just anyone's hands. However, releasing their seals could grant the wielder power comparable to the heroes of myth, making them truly legendary items. In his past life, Ed Troyven had somehow managed to release the seal on this very sword, the strand of fate. Reflecting on Troyven's actions back then, one crucial detail stood out to Theo. Until that seal was broken, the sword, despite its potential, was little more than a glorified, albeit very dangerous, plaything. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Evelyn stood in the doorway, offering apologies for the late hour. She informed him that the captain, Commander Julius Ragnar, wished to see him and asked if he could spare a moment. Theo found Commander Julius seated behind a large desk, looking surprisingly relaxed. Julius greeted him with a gruff smile, expressing genuine relief that Theo had returned alive. The commander's expression then grew more serious, his hands steepling before him. He cut straight to the point, asking if Captain Isvan intended to retire. A moment later, Isvan himself entered, looking weary but composed. He confirmed Julius's assumption with a sigh, admitting it was a shame but unavoidable. He explained the toll the last battle had taken, the loss of his dragon partner and his leg. Continuing active duty would be too difficult for his aging body. He intended to return to his hometown and spend his remaining days honoring the comrades who had passed before him, taking a slow sip from a cup of tea. Julius nodded in understanding, conceding that Isvan had earned his rest and no one could rightfully stop him. Isvan thanked his commander with a respectful nod. Before leaving, however, Isvan offered a piece of information as perhaps a final contribution, stating it wasn't much of a trade, but he could tell Julius about the new recruit, Theo Ragnar. Julius leaned forward intently, simply saying, "Tell me." Isvan recounted Theo's performance, highlighting the most astonishing fact. At his young age, Theo's Thundergate was already open. Julius's visible eye widened in shock, the name Thundergate echoing his surprise. He pondered aloud the implications. Could this boy truly overcome the limits separating ordinary humans from superhumans? Isvan confirmed he shared the commander's surprise when he first witnessed it, placing his cup down with emphasis. He elaborated that it clearly wasn't an innate ability. It felt as though the gate had been forcibly opened, perhaps through intense struggle or sheer, desperate will, pushing past its natural seals. He used the analogy of a bowl, Theo's capacity for growth, suddenly becoming vastly wider than the contents it currently held. It seemed paradoxical, impossible even, yet it happened. A fierce, predatory grin spread across Julius's face. He understood. Their task, then, was clear. They needed to fill that wide bowl, nurture Theo's explosive potential. Isvan concluded that this was all the insight he could offer as a senior. Julius looked towards the doorway, where Theo had presumably been waiting. From now on, the commander declared, Theo would have to learn and forge his own path forward. Theo stepped fully into the room, absorbing the weight of the conversation he had partially overheard. Later, under the vast, snow-dusted expanse of the cavalry's training grounds, Julius approached Theo. He commended Theo again for his great work during the operation. Theo modestly deflected, attributing their success to his comrades. Julius chuckled, calling him a little rascal before getting serious. He inquired about the development of Theo's martial skills. Theo considered the question, initially thinking Julius meant his general fighting ability. He admitted he felt more comfortable in combat situations now. Julius clarified, shaking his head slightly. He wasn't asking about basic combat skills. His gaze was sharp, focused on Theo's sword hand. He wanted to know what realm of swordsmanship Theo had attained. Caught off guard, Theo confessed that he wasn't sure. He elaborated that he had simply focused his efforts on emulating the sword techniques of the Ragnarhead family. Julius made a non-committal sound, remarking that everyone says that. He hefted his own massive training sword, and with a subtle shift in his stance, the world around Theo fractured. Reality dissolved, replaced by a swirling vortex of crimson energy and jagged, floating shards of ruby-like crystal. The air crackled with power. Theo recognized this immediately, the demon dragon glass domain. He observed that this manifestation was markedly different from the tranquil, blossom-filled glass domain displayed by Osa Ragnar, the sword dragon, before the nomination ceremony. He voiced his dawning thought. Was this realm a depiction of a user's own martial art philosophy? A flicker of understanding sparked in his eyes. Julius confirmed it with a grim nod. This violent, crimson world was the manifestation of his demon sword. Energy flared around the commander as he settled into a low, powerful stance. He moved, a blur of controlled fury, demonstrating his martial art. His sword carved through the crimson space with devastating slashes, each blow radiating raw, untamed power and destructive force. Theo watched, captivated and slightly intimidated, as the domain itself seemed to roar in concert with Julius's movements, pulsing with waves of pure, aggressive energy. A storm contained only by the commander's will. The display concluded, Julius standing amidst the swirling red, his blade still vibrating slightly. He turned to Theo, asking simply, how was it? How had Theo perceived the martial art of the demon dragon that he had just witnessed? Theo answered honestly, the raw power still resonating within him. It was incredibly strong, overwhelmingly destructive. Julius grunted in agreement. That, he explained, was the inherent nature of the demon. Intuitive, straightforward. It represented an unyielding will that ultimately shattered all obstacles, a direct path of violence, destruction, strength, and even death itself, piercing through everything in its way. Having demonstrated his own philosophy, Julius then shifted focus, asking Theo to recall the sword of the Lord of Plum Blossom Palace, Osa Ragnar, that he had witnessed. Theo described it as gorgeous and beautiful, remembering the imagery of blooming flowers. Julius acknowledged this, explaining that Osa's sword embodies the essence of life. It represents the journey from seed to bud, finally blooming into a flower, life manifesting itself. It depicted a process that was slow but smooth, indomitable. Even when swayed, torn apart, or forced to detour, life, like the plum blossom tree, doesn't stop growing. The realization struck Theo fully. This was what Julius meant by martial arts, by the realm of the sword. It wasn't just about techniques, but the fundamental interpretation and philosophy behind them, vastly different even amongst the nine dragons. A faint smile touched Julius's lips. He posed a question to Theo. Did he perceive these two interpretations, Osa's life and his own demon, essentially death and violence, as fundamentally conflicting concepts? Theo hesitated, stammering, wasn't that the case? Julius stepped closer, leaning in slightly, stating it wouldn't be very instructive or fun if he simply provided the answer. Instead, a thick, leather-bound book materialized in Julius's hand, glowing with a faint inner light. Theo stared, curious. Julius explained its significance. It contained the records of a philosophical debate on the principles of swordsmanship between the master of the Plum Blossom Palace, himself, and a previous sword dragon. Theo's eyes widened in shock as the implications hit him. Julius looked directly at Theo, acknowledging the exceptional circumstances. Though highly unusual, he declared, as spectral plum blossoms drifted through the fading crimson domain, that Theo Ragnar was now the joint successor to both the demon dragon and the sword dragon.